Good evening. Welcome to members of the Community Stakeholder Forum. I'd like to welcome the wider viewing audience as well. I'd like to do a quick introduction as we do at the start of each meeting, just to clarify for any guests on the forum and for any new people watching what we're all about here. So this forum is part of an innovative approach adopted by Uttlesford District Council to engaging the whole community in conversations about shaping the future of the district through its local plan. At the heart of this approach is an open public consultation taking place over several months rather than the usual weeks. The plan itself has been broken down into smaller topics which can be more easily debated and commented upon. Every couple of weeks, this forum meets for a presentation on a particular topic. This forum is made up of people who represent different interest areas across the region, but it cannot represent every interest area or every group of residents. The forum debate that follows each presentation is designed to stimulate the public consultation that follows each meeting. And it is important to note that the public consultation is the most important element of this process. It is really vital that all stakeholders contribute to the debate. And I urge everyone to use their network of contacts to share the forum presentations and to encourage participation and comment, especially try to involve members of the community who may not otherwise make their voices heard. If you go to the UDC website and search the new local plan, you'll find various buttons that allow you to submit your views under each topic. At the end of this consultation period, Uttlesford District Council will consider all the representations received during the consultation and consider them when drafting the local plan. So to be clear, this group is independent of the council, is not a decision-making body, and its members' views will not override those contributed by the wider community throughout the public consultation. Participants have been asked to make contributions from the perspective of their special interest area rather than to advance any personal or professional agenda, such as in relation to their place of residence or the interests of a specific organisation. Now, turning to this evening's meeting, which is about the local economy. If you're watching on Zoom, can I encourage you to post questions in the Q&A function? We're only going to have time for 3 or 4 public questions this evening. So if you see your question or something related to your question already there, please upvote it because then it will be more likely to be asked, because we'll take the 3 or 4 most popular questions. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Paul Cowie from Newcastle University, who's going to give us a presentation about the local economy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on a really interesting topic. I'm an Innovation Research Fellow in something called the National Innovation Centre for Rural Enterprise, which is part of Newcastle University. And my research focuses on the future planning and technology, the impact of technology on rural places. If we could get the next slide, please. So I put this in because A, I like the quote, but B, I thought it was a good way to kind of stimulate the debate. Technology is the answer, but what is the question? And to some extent, the local plan is that question. Technology is going to happen no matter what. But you've got an opportunity through the local plan to ask some of those questions of technology and shape how technology will be deployed in your area, rather than just being done to and have technology deployed from outside the area without anybody else saying what happens. So what I'm going to talk about is a kind of couple of projects that we've worked on as exemplars to give you some ideas of what's possible in the planning technique, and then look a bit further ahead. So I've kind of titled this 2035 Uttlesford, and what's the kind of next generation of technologies that is going to start to impact on the way you live, the way you work, and the way you kind of develop the area in the kind of medium to longer term. So for the first example, could you go to the next slide again? I'm going to talk about a project that we were involved in called Rural Enterprise Hubs. And we've seen in the last year, and indeed with this meeting tonight, that everybody's kind of switching to a new way of working, remote working. You know, Zoom is my life now, and I imagine it's the life of many other people. And this project, Rural Enterprise Hubs, was kind of started before COVID, but in a way it's come of age in COVID era. So what we realized, flexible office space, and particularly office space with super fast broadband connectivity. And a lot of rural businesses now rely on this, even if you're not a kind of technology business, if you're trying to sell things through the internet, or indeed if you're other things, trying to update information for government websites and things, you need that connectivity. So this picture is an rural enterprise hub in the headquarters of the Northumberland National Park. And originally they converted some of their building due to cutbacks. They lost some of their staff and had free space, so they converted it to office space to rent to the local community. They found it was so popular, they built these pods in the grounds of the estate, and 3 to begin with. And again, they were filled immediately with people wanting to come into them, and they've put another 3 in since then. So it's created this really vibrant network of small businesses in a rural area. And what happens is most rural businesses are very small, they're single people or 1 or 2 employees, and they don't necessarily have those networks of knowledge and being able to share information, not just about kind of strategy or markets, but just the kind of day-to-day stuff that you have over the water cooler when you're in a bigger business. It's also proved to be really useful way of getting information from outside, so from development organizations, local authorities. Sorry, my mic's on.
Oh, sorry, can I just ask if you could turn your microphone up slightly? If you could just turn your volume up a little bit.
Is that any better?
That's much better. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm in a remote rural area myself, and my internet connection isn't the greatest sometimes. So yeah, so they've proved to be very good at providing avenues for external advisors, particularly kind of things like Department for International Trade, trade advice, business advice, and things to come through there. So this is a kind of possible option for you as in the local plan to create these spaces for rural businesses to kind of develop. A lot of the businesses that move into these are home-based businesses, and they want that separation between home life and business life. And particularly if they want to employ and have an employee, they don't necessarily want that employee coming to their home as business. So that's kind of one idea, rural enterprise hubs. Go to the next slide, please. The second bit of research, which we're currently doing for DEFRA, looking at the impact of COVID, has focused on business space, or one of the big issues that's cropped up in the research is business space for manufacturing and creative and digital industries. Now, these are significant employers and contribute significantly to gross value added in rural areas. And what we also find, and this is true across Europe, is that they're dominated by family businesses. So over 75% of these businesses are owned or managed by families, and therefore they've got really strong ties to the local community. And this can be particularly difficult when they want to grow, and they find difficulty in finding suitable premises to grow. What often happens is they either split themselves over multiple sites, and that's really inefficient, and that productivity is much lower, or else they have to migrate to the kind of urban fringe business parks or larger business premises away. So they lose that kind of connectivity to their local community where they've often grown up or have a connection to, and also their employees then have to commute to the kind of area across that way. So what you often see in development plans and also developments is a focus on small business units, little trade units on the edge of towns and things like that. And there isn't these kind of slightly bigger premises that you have to go. This is often kind of made even worse by a settlement hierarchy approach to these kind of things, where that kind of development is focused on the bigger urban centres or bigger developments in the town. So you need some kind of flexibility within the local plan to be able to cater for these kind of businesses. There are not many of them, admittedly, but when they do occur, they make a really significant impact on the local economy and the local society for that particular area. So how do you deal with these kind of slightly uncertain events or infrequent events, but have a really big impact? Can I go to the next slide, please? So what I'm going to talk about now is some slightly kind of further advanced or future issues. And one thing that's kind of coming quickly now, actually, is the fourth industrial revolution. And this is a shift away from you can see from the little schematic there, to a system of economy based on cyber-physical systems. So much more connectivity, much more data-driven, and much more automated. Now, a lot of this has been developed in response to the kind of the flaws in cities. So how do you police a city? How do you manage a city? How do you resource the city? Often with limited resources. So the technology is seen as the answer to kind of square the circle of spending less, but getting more out of it. Now, a lot of the problems that cities face aren't necessarily the same that rural problems face. And often rural, with the rural idyll, an idea of what's happening with rural is seen as the antidote, a way to get away from all this, to log out of the kind of internet and avoid these kind of connectivities. Can I go to the next slide, please? But we would argue in our centre that actually rural areas have a head start on some of these kind of technologies and developments. So if you think about distributed renewable energy systems, these are connected systems. A lot of the pioneers in this were islands, so the Scottish Islands, but also in the Mediterranean, places like that. So they're leading the way with this, and this is a real opportunity for rural areas. The other big technology that's coming around the corner is Internet of Things, and that's being demonstrated in precision farming and those kind of industries. They're really leading the way with this connectivity. And what these things do is changes the relationship between technology and society. The quote there from Wozniak, it was really interesting around smart grids, that it turns passive consumers into active managers of common resources. And I'll talk in the next slide about how this can affect kind of development and things like the circular economy in rural areas and kind of retaining more of the value there. So what you need to think about is the link between these technologies and the societal scale problems that they're seeking to face, particularly in a rural area. And the other thing is the infrastructure, many of this is needed, will be rolled out in cities. We're seeing this with broadband. The incremental approach leaves rural areas kind of way behind in some kind of areas. So how can you kind of accommodate this? And this is probably a more tricky element than the previous two kind of instances. How do you incorporate this into planning, and how can you... next slide, please. So one of the projects we've been working on to help kind of deliver this idea is smart rural communal buildings. The pictured here is my local village hall, and I was a treasurer of the village hall for 10 years. And if you're in a small rural community, trying to manage a kind of infrastructure like this is quite hard. You're constantly raising money, you're constantly repairing and things like this. And energy costs really are the biggest burden on the kind of community in this way. So what we're looking at now is using the best technologies, renewable energy, battery storage, and intelligent building management to maximize the kind of or minimize the costs of heating and lighting these kind of businesses. And we realized when we started this project, there were just in Northumberland, there's over 1,000 of these kind of village church halls, community buildings. And if you could connect the battery storage and the energy generation together, you've got a distributed power station. And as we've seen last summer, the grid capacity has to be managed. And at the moment, it's quite difficult to manage it. And in fact, they were paying people to take electricity out of the grid in the summer when there was too much solar and too much wind energy. And similarly, in the winter, when the demand is at the highest, you can sell this energy back to the grid at really quite incredible prices. And this then generates an income for these community buildings, which hopefully will make them self-sufficient financially as well as kind of power-wise across there. So it's a really good way of using the best of these technologies at a local level and ensuring the benefits are felt locally. Next slide, please. So some planning issues, the kind of fourth industrial revolution. The first one that we really find really interesting, and again, this is a kind of longer term issue, is connected and autonomous vehicles. They're always going to come tomorrow, but never quite get there. But I think they are definitely on the way and definitely going to make a significant impact on all areas. And in my opinion, a bigger impact on rural than perhaps the urban areas. So if you imagine an autonomous vehicle is something that will drive without any human intervention. So it will give mobility to everybody in society. So younger people who don't have driving licenses, older people who perhaps don't want to drive anymore, people with physical disabilities that mean they can't drive. So everyone gets the kind of mobility. This will probably fundamentally change the way we play, we commute, lifestyle decisions for old and young. But the problem is, where will these be located? So if a car can go wherever it wants without a driver, they won't be parked in urban areas. They'll move to the rural areas or the peri-urban, the edge of urban areas. So there's a risk at these kind of areas on the edge of big conurbations, and you're right on the heart of a couple of them, just become giant car parks and servicing centres for these autonomous vehicles. And again, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in place to ensure that they can go anywhere. So you have to have 3D mapping, you have to have 5G connectivity to make them go. And if these aren't rolled out to rural areas, what will happen? The other issue from a planning point of view with this is that it's anticipated they won't be privately owned. They'll be on demand. So what do you do with all that space that's currently given over to car parking in housing, in city centres, in rural centres? There's going to be a lot more space available. Could we turn it to green space? Could we turn it to additional developments? Some properties, grow on space for businesses and things like that. So there's a lot of issues there. And again, this might happen within the life of this current plan. And therefore, is there possible to be flexible to be able to embrace these technologies when they emerge and deal with some of these issues that might occur? Next slide, please. The other one I'll quickly touch on, and I realise you've also got a housing track event as well, so I won't dwell too long on this one. This is the last one. We're in an ageing society, and rural areas are ageing faster. And the statistic there, 1 in 5 people now live to their 100th birthday, and 29% of the people born in 2011 will make it to 100. So we need homes and housing to be able to adapt to the circumstances of people as they go through their lives. One of the big problems in urban and rural areas is actually under-occupation of property. So people that empty nesters or retired people that perhaps find difficult moving into different accommodation when they've been brought up families in there. But is it possible to houses that are flexible and able to adapt to different people's lives, or make it easier to make those changes to different areas or different housing? And is it possible to encourage more multi-generational developments that support all ages as they work through their lives? And again, technology's got a role in this to make sure that people can live better for longer, but it has to be driven by the individuals and not kind of determined by technology or the people behind technology. So how can we ensure that rural areas are also vibrant and economically and socially sustainable places for all ages from top to bottom? And I think that's my last of my slides. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much. That was incredibly interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of comments from our stakeholder forum. We do actually have 3 guest members with us today, so I'm going to come to those people first and ask them if there are things that they want to add to that, or comments they want to make on it. And if I could give those people just 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm sorry today if I cut anybody off, but we do have lots and lots of people. So say all your most important things first would be my advice. So first, could I come to Shara Vickers, who is from the Saffron Walden Bid?
Oh, okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much as well for the presentation. It was very interesting. It's nice to see ideas for the future. I'm the chair of the Saffron Walden Bid, and for those of you who don't know what a bid is, it was democratically voted in 2018 by, I think it was about 2/3 majority, and the bid, whoever's a levy member has to pay to be a member, and it's just covering a small area, which is basically Saffron Walden town, but there's 270 businesses, and we represent, well, pretty much not all businesses, but most retail, hospitality, close contact, beauty and hair, and quite a lot of professional services as well. So as well as that, I actually am the director of Teller Limited. I moved my business from Canary Wharf to Saffron Walden about 9 years ago now. So and the reason why I did that was because I moved here, and actually it's a lovely town to live and work in. So over the last year, the bid has changed massively, and the businesses have, because we've adapted to help the businesses, because the idea of the bid is that we help the businesses to thrive. And the way we would normally be doing that is to attract lots of people to come into town, have a lovely time. Lots of footfall means hopefully lots of people spending money with the lovely retail outlets and pubs and restaurants and cafes. However, COVID kind of changed all that, because it meant that people weren't supposed to be going out, and that caused all sorts of problems. So our businesses, whereas in the past they'd be wanting lots of people to come into town because it meant that they would be very successful, it meant that the shops would be busy, it meant that there would be no empty shops as well. COVID has kind of put a bit of a kibosh on that. So as the bid and as a town business, we've kind of had to massively adapt. So we've tried to help the businesses by making sure that they can have a safe property so that people feel comfortable to come in when they are allowed to be open. So we've helped all the businesses by giving them opening, basically. We gave them recovery packs, which included things like posters to say how many people can come in and safely be in the shop, hand sanitizer, arrows for directional movement, arrows for outside as well, which we work with Linda Howells from Uttlesford District Council. And also we helped signpost all our businesses so they could get some grants as well. And this is where it's interesting, because I only took over as the bid chair in February last year, just before we decided to go into a lockdown, which was a bit of a baptism of fire, really. I'd never really dealt with town council, district council, county council, and suddenly we all had to work together to try and help the businesses. So it's been quite interesting, because I've been really lucky in that I've got to work with some great people from UDC, Town Council, and also Essex County Council. We've all worked together to try and make the town safe. There's been a few things that have kind of popped up. The first thing was we were very aware there were a lot of businesses that were not using technology properly. So they were very complacent because they were used to people footfall. It was great, you know, in the spring and summer in Saffron Walden and on market days. So they were very used to footfall being their main way of making money. And suddenly, with the pandemic, they literally, like that, had to, if they didn't have a website, then they weren't doing any business at all. There was also people who'd never been on social media. They really didn't have a clue how to promote themselves on social media. Again, a baptism of fire for them. But I actually think that Saffron Walden is a very resilient town. And what I've noticed in the last year is how quickly these small businesses, it's a bit like that saying, isn't it? It's a lot easier to turn a small boat than it is to move a cruise liner. These small businesses have gone, okay, this isn't working. We're going to have to do something different. We're going to have to do click and collect, or we're going to have to do delivery, or we're going to have to do stuff online. So we've worked with all the businesses to try and...
30 seconds more, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on. Sorry.
Okay, all right. So there's a couple of things that that were key that I was a bit concerned about, that regarding properties. So I know there's a few empty shops in Saffron Walden at the moment, but it looks like they're all being taken up. Not every single one, but most of them. But there is very little office space in Saffron Walden. I know this because I try to get office space, and that is an issue, because I think we need to, it's good to have a good balance of both. The office businesses spend the money, and the businesses downstairs, retail and cafes, because they're there all week. There's also the permitted development rights, which keeps coming up, that we're a bit concerned about. The ability to be able to convert a business premises into residential. We're not keen on that particularly, because the patchwork of having residential and business in a very small shopping centre, we think that needs to be addressed as well. And future proofing. We've got lots of ideas for technology, for physical future proofing as well, having outdoor dining and things like that. So basically, I've got lots and lots and lots of ideas. I'm very good at talking, and not for very short spaces of time, though.
Sarah, because everybody on this group, if they've got things to say to UDC about the plan, go onto the website, add them all, list them all as much as you like. It all gets put through this process. So don't worry if you haven't managed to say something here. Okay. You can still input it on the website. I'm now going to come to Wendy Martin from Stansted Airport College. Are you there, Wendy? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm head of college at Stansted Airport College, and I just want to give you a brief overview of what we do at the college, and a little bit about the success over the last 3 years. So we did open in September 2018. This is our third year, although it's been a very different year of operation. We've got capacity for over 500 learners, and since opening in 2018, demand has been extremely high for places, and we are currently at full capacity, and we have been oversubscribed in previous years. So there is a real demand for young people in and around Uttlesford to be attending the college and training and developing to move their skills and knowledge to move into the aviation industry, but also industries that support the running on the operations of the airport as well. So working with a number of the on-site business partners. We've also recruited since opening 60 apprentices. So we provide a number of opportunities for young people to move into apprenticeship so they can earn and learn at the same time. It is a partnership with Manchester Airport Group and Harlow College, and that close interaction with employers and local employers is hugely beneficial for the learners because it gives them a huge amount of exposure to industry and makes them helps them to be work ready on completion of their programme. It gives them a clear line of sight into meaningful and sustainable jobs. And in addition to that, it also helps us as a college be responsive to the ever-evolving skills needs of industries. As I think was mentioned in Paul's presentation, is sort of rapid. We're in the fourth revolution. There's sort of rapidly changing demand for skills, and we regularly review our curriculum and are responsive to those skills needs, and we can continue to develop and evolve our curriculum to make sure that we are meeting the demands of local employers. We currently offer courses in aviation operations, which trains young people for a broad range of different careers, from working within security, border force, to flight operations, the customer service agents, cabin crew, airfield operations, just to mention a few. And we also offer courses in aeronautical engineering, so it trains young people to either work actually on the inspection and maintenance or manufacture of aircraft parts specifically. Also, we do have a number of young people progress on to university to look at the more sort of the development of aircraft design and the aircraft of the future, and looking at how we can make aircraft more sustainable and environmentally friendly for the future. We also offer courses in hospitality and events management, supporting a lot of the hospitality sector in and around the airport. This year, we're looking to introduce a level 4 and 5 HND HNC programme in international travel and tourism, with a particular specific pathway around aviation management and airport management. Therefore, helping to a time where there's likely to be fewer jobs in the industry, and this particular year, it gives individuals an opportunity to develop more advanced skills and knowledge and improve their opportunities on completion of the programme in a year or 2 years' time, when we're very confident that our learners are going to play a key pivotal role in the recovery of the aviation environment. And we're currently in the process of launching our Blue Skies Ahead programme, which focuses on the recovery of the industry and the key role our students will have in that. A number of the issues that face the industry pre-COVID, such as a significantly ageing workforce, are still going to be there during the recovery. So it's really key that we are training young people now, so that when the aviation sector starts its recovery, we have skilled young people that are ready to move into these roles. So we've got fantastic links with employees.
20 more seconds, Wendy, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. At the airport, again, pre-COVID, there was up to 500 vacancies at the airport at any one time. So for us to be able to provide young people into those roles is absolutely sort of key in supporting the local economy, and also enabling the local economy and local businesses to continue growing by providing the skilled workforce for the future. And we've got I'll finish on, we are considering at the moment plans to enlarge our existing site to develop an education and skills campus for the future, which will include combining the Aerozone, which is an aviation themed learning hub for young people, along with the Stansted Airport Employment and Skills Academy, which provides training for adults. So we're currently considering plans And I think that will be absolutely key to have one central skills hub and skills site for young people all the way from 4 years old up to adults of 99, 100 years old if they're going to be living that long, all in one site, and a real sort of central hub for skills within Uttlesford. Thank you.
Much, Wendy. I'm sorry we don't have more time for everybody.
No.
Everyone's got so many interesting things to say. Sorry, could I move on to our third guest member, which is Martin Sylvester from the Chesford Research Park. Thank you, Martin. Oh, Martin, you're on mute. There you go.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to join the forum this evening. Essentially, Chesford Research Park, as it now is, emanated out of the acquisition from Aventus, the 250-acre site. It's on the Cambridge side of Saffron Walden, and at the heart of the 250 acres were about 350,000 square feet of buildings. Most of those were to do with agrochemical research in all forms. And so when the site was originally acquired back in literally 2000, essentially the task was to actually understand and be able to adapt those buildings and to create a community from which the current park has grown. So over the course of the last 20 years, we've been at the forefront of innovation, not only in building forms, but actually to establish Chesterford very much as being part of that important life science cluster, which lies to the south of Cambridge. Unlike Silicon Valley over in the States, which spans about 160 miles, actually the glow of technology and research coming out of Cambridge gets dimmer as you get further away from it. And so we're very much at the edge, about 15 miles from Cambridge. And we've had to really work very hard to put ourselves to the forefront of all the parks which have grown up closer to Cambridge. And I'm pleased to say that we've attracted not only the international leading lights to Chesterford, but we have a great nucleus of starter companies. So picking up actually on the professor's introduction, we actually start our sort of spectrum of space from a building which converts from a mansion house. And so in there you can have a room of about 200 square feet on easy in, easy out terms. And that then spins right through the range to about 60,000 square feet of bespoke laboratory accommodation. The reason that Cambridge is important to Chesterford is that it's the pool of skills that we need to be able to attract, and we need to be able to convince companies that when they move to Chesterford that they're not isolated and that they can actually pull staff from Cambridge. And so actually transport, which has also been mentioned, is at the forefront of our thinking as well. So we have regular coach services and connections through the rail service at Chesterford, at Audley End, to be able to get people to and fro the site. In terms of the sort of context in which we're working, it is a research park. The distinction being is that when you're in research, essentially with the life sciences, you have a lower footprint of occupation. It's usually one person to 250 square feet because they're in a lab and they're doing their work on the bench and then writing up their findings in an adjoining space. That contrasts with an office building, perhaps in the city centre, which might be on an occupancy of one person to 60 square feet. The laboratories are very expensive to produce, and this is why, again, we need a reflection of Cambridge to be able to make our business case work. They're approximately 60% more expensive to bring to occupational use from the bare shell than a conventional office building. So the way in which we're developing Chesterford is to focus very much on getting that community, getting the cross-section of companies that then can relate to each other. There's a lot of interaction between the companies. And it's actually helping companies start from the very genesis of their idea and hoping that we can attract them through the various stages of their growth such that they become world-class businesses. And we've been successful in the past. For instance, when Sylvester moved out of Cambridge University with a concept, we took that company through to the point where it reversed into a company which is now known as Illumina. Illumina is a multinational company of many billions of value, and that's the original concept in that company grew through the support that we were able to give it at Chesford. So it's an exciting place to be. The businesses which we are attracting actually offer a whole plethora of job skills, so that we've got people who are obviously specialist scientists, but all the functions way back to all the necessary support that we have not only within those businesses, but actually within the park itself are all displayed. So the cross-section couldn't be stronger. In terms of the way which we sort of foster that community being, as it were, we have at the core of the park the nucleus building. It's one of the best central facilities buildings on any of the parks in the area. And essentially there people can get food, they can get conferencing, breakout space, gym, etc., etc. So it's very important that we treat the whole of our work at Chesford in a very holistic way to ensure that we're providing the very best facilities for our occupiers.
Martin, thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. So 3 really interesting different views of businesses and local economy around the area. So to the forum members, if you have something to add on this or something you'd like to say, then do please, as we have been in the last few meetings, raise your hand either virtually or literally, and I will try to get to as many people as possible. But yet again, if I don't get to you for some reason, please do go to the website and submit your views. But I did promise that Janet would kick us off, as she is our economy representative. Janet, over to you.
Thank you.
Just 4 minutes, please, Janet. Thank you.
Okay. If people don't know, I chair a subgroup of Uttlesford Strategic Partnership, and the things I'm going to say I have discussed with our membership and quite a few people on email. So, first of all, I think we need to address our lack of employment and business space. I understand the need for housing, but we have lost quite a bit of our existing space that would have been seen as business over to housing. And I think there is a bit of a friction there. A lot of our companies, yes, are small, as has already been mentioned, but they haven't got places to expand to. That's the first point. Secondly, I think working at home is embedded, and I think that the effects of COVID will carry on for a number of years. There has been some reporting of family versus workspace within houses, and that sort of trying to get, you know, who's got the dining table. Is it a business table? Is it a place for families to eat? And people don't have enough room. Self-employment, yes, is growing, but one of the things we discussed at our last meeting, we need some communal business spaces where there are services and support. It's been mentioned already today, and it could be rent a desk, it could be that you have a building or use of an existing building, whether it is a village hall, as been mentioned by Paul, or other places like that, where we help get businesses developing space or places for people to work that are not just their home. I'm just going to say broadband. I haven't got the answer to it, but we need that connectivity, otherwise none of this can actually happen. My big sort of theme is that I believe we need to help our businesses by having a skilled local workforce. And to do that, ideally, we need a connected pathway for people. So it means working with your businesses early on around their needs, and it connects to the things you do in schools, the things you do in colleges, what you might do in adult training centres, apprenticeships, work placements, all of that needs to be connected rather than lots of different organisations trying to do the same thing and competing. We need to have a connected skills workforce development pathway. At the moment, we have over 2,500 people on universal credit, the effect of COVID. We expect that number to rise once furlough has started to sort of move out. And we also know that young people are going to be those who are probably adversely affected more than any other age group. So while we're doing our connected work sort of pathway to work, we need to make sure that we're picking up and supporting those people who need the support most, whether they're people with disabilities, whether they're people with young people who maybe haven't as much work experience. We have no job centre plus. We've mentioned this at a couple of our meetings. They have been offered through the works of people like Linda, who's on here now, some pop-up places where they might use, or community venues they might use. But we need to make sure that we're connecting to the mainstream services as well, and finding a way of getting through that hurdle.
Partly because of time, but also because actually there's a bit of interference on your microphone, so we might just come back to you a bit later if that's
okay.
right.
Okay.
A part two for us, so hopefully we can sort those microphone issues out. I'm going to come to Anthony and Mark, and then perhaps I could ask you, Paul, to jump back in on some of the things you might have heard to comment on that. So Anthony, can I come to you next, please?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get that quite right. Yes, thank you, Chair. Dr. Cowie, I'm going to preface this very quickly with 2 words, and that is Stansted Airport, because I believe that in many ways that upsets the general way in which people work in this area. I'm very grateful to you for providing all the facts that you have, particularly showing the proportion of employed residents in senior positions in the area. I have in fact prepared a paper of similar type in the past, and all of this is based on pre-pandemic situation. My concern is that whereas you show the movements in and out of Athelsford for work, this is based on the last census, I believe, and as a result of that, I would suggest it's very out of date. But be that as it may, the fact is that the vast majority of those in grades A, B, and C in the area leave the area to work. And those that come into work, generally speaking, perform the more menial tasks. Now, in this respect, Stansted Airport is and its associates is the largest employer in Eastern England. That makes a vast difference to a district such as this, particularly this, because this district is one of the most undernumbered, if that's the right expression, in the whole of the home counties. If you look at it per hectare, it's approximately 2 persons per hectare throughout. If you look at the whole of Essex, that is 4 times that of Athelsford. And if you look at the whole of England and Wales, that's twice the amount of Athelsford. So you can see the extent to which there is this imbalance. Now, Janet has talked about the problems relating to employment, and I won't go into that in any way. But my concern is this: Stansted Airport is, as I have stated, a vast employer. Take that away, what are we left with? I think we've got to consider that, because the vast majority of those who work at Stansted Airport don't come from the district. Now, do you comment on that?
Yes, why don't, if you don't mind, Mark, I'll just ask Paul to come back on that and then go to you next, if that's okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I have to say, I went to university in Chelmsford, so I can know a little bit about the area. But I agree that you're kind of atypical in the sense that that's such a dominant employer across that way. But I think that doesn't mitigate against the fact that you do need to have these other options and the flexibility to be able to allow other businesses to grow. And we've heard from Janet that you know, that's a problem. And in terms of Sarah in the city centres and that flexibility of space for businesses, A, to start up, but B, to grow. What I would say in the local plan is you need that flexibility built in. And there are certain structures that sometimes get put in local plans that mitigate against that. Unfortunately, the permitted development rights is beyond the scope of the local plan, so that's something you have to lobby about externally. But that, you know, that is a problem. So yeah, I hopefully some of these things that I've given you, the enterprise hubs work, the flexible grow on space for other businesses, manufacturing, creative economies, and things like that. You're kind of between London and, you know, Cambridge as well, so you're able to tap into that, and you know, the stuff that Martin's doing is helping bring some of that down. Can you expand that further into the rural areas? Yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't have the answer to Stansted, unfortunately.
Thank you, Paul. Mark, we'll come to you next, please.
Thank you. So some very interesting comments and presentations this evening. So from the health and wellbeing point of view, I just wanted to reiterate a point that I've made on previous occasions, that I would encourage us to recognise that health and care services are a significant contribution to the sort of economic growth agenda in our community. And there is an important part to play. So I really am a strong supporter of the work that people like Martin and other colleagues have been trying to do in terms of developing the life science agenda along the whole Cambridge, Stansted, London corridor. And whilst we are sitting perhaps on the periphery of Cambridge and the activities that obviously generates, we should also recognise that in terms of the life science and health agenda, there are some interesting developments going on to the south of the district as well, with the arrival of Public Health England coming to Harlow, and also the development of a state-of-the-art brand new hospital on the in Harlow, replacing the existing Princess Alexandra. And there are opportunities there if we're to develop the economy in life sciences for forging strong links with those new developments. So it doesn't all have to emanate out of Cambridge and London, as it were. There's ways that we can capitalise, particularly I think on Public Health England's arrival. Two other points though, with the success that we might have with the life science agenda, health and life science agenda, means that the workforce inevitably becomes more challenging. So whilst it's already been touched on that rural areas are growing and ageing faster, that's certainly true in terms of Uttlesford, that will increase significantly the demands for local health and care services. And we need the ability to be able to attract and retain health and care staff that work and live in the area. And to support that, we're going to need to use technology. And that means I echo and support all the points that have been made about connectivity. So increasingly as we age, it's going to be important that the homes and the facilities that we use are digitally connected so that we can conduct remote monitoring of people, particularly as they age, and we want them to age well and enjoy life to the full. So digital connectivity is really important, and to support both the workforce, digital agenda in health and well-being, which is, as I say, a major contribution to the health economic growth agenda for Uttlesford. We also need to ensure that we've got the skill set. So I would again welcome the points that have been made around the use of Skills Hub, the new college on the airport campus, etc. And I think we're not actually at the moment thinking how we can join up some of these sectors and the opportunities. So from a health point of view, I know you've got 10 GP practices, you've got a community hospital, you've got community nursing and care staff, all of whom increasingly are going to need digital enhanced skills. And we need to foster relationships with people like Harlow College and others to ensure that we've got some of those infrastructure elements in place locally. So I would just encourage people to recognise the health contribution to their growth agenda. The digital connectivity is absolutely paramount. Our ability to attract and sustain a workforce that is going to care for the ageing population that we're inevitably going to be seeing is absolutely critical. And we should also not just look always and gravitate towards Cambridge, but we should also be mindful that we have some unique benefits in this London Stansted Cambridge corridor, and there are other partnerships I think we need to be fostering that would be ultimately to our benefit.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for that. Frank and Samantha, thank you. I'm just going to come to Colin because he had a physical hand up, I think, a little while ago. So Colin, if I could come to you next, and then Frank and Samantha. Thank you, Colin.
Right. The contributions, I think, are very interesting, but they tend to be sector-based conversations. So we talk a bit about science, we talk a bit about research, talked a bit about education. But what we're not hearing and seeing is the holistic overview of what Uttlesford needs to be, not 10 to 15 years, but maybe 50 years into the future. At the moment, I think we're all aware that a vast majority of the people who live in Uttlesford don't work in Uttlesford, they travel out. And a lot of the houses that are being built for people who will work elsewhere, but will live in the town. The thing which I always look for in an economic review is where are we going to build commercial and other premises that will create jobs for the people in the houses that we're building. I mean, when I was working as a developer years ago, we actually matched the houses we were building with offices and factories and manufacturing space, so that you weren't creating the vast communication problems that we look like we're going to create following the initiatives that are talked about today. Now, I always use the LEPs, the local economic partnerships, who usually were the people that had the best overview of business development in an area, what the sectors are likely to be over a period of time, and will have a forward view on what those sectors are going to do. And I would have hoped that the planning department at Uttlesford will communicate with them, and I know they didn't for the last plan, because I spoke to the LEP myself. But in future, I hope they do speak to the LEP, get the information and integrate the business development requirements, an overview strategy there, together with the strategy that's going to increase the number of houses, because that in turn will reduce the stress on other things like infrastructure and communications.
Thanks very much, Colin. Can I just encourage everyone watching at home to keep posting your questions on the Q&A. At the end of this forum discussion, we will have time for a few of the public questions. Thank you, Richard. I've noted your hand up. Frank, could I come to you next? And then Paul, perhaps I could come to you after that, and then Samantha.
Yes, please. Thanks, Chair. A very quick point, trying to pick up the sort of the town centre development comment that was made earlier. We really need to see joined up planning in town centres to prevent saturation of one shop type over another. You've just got to think back a few years and they were all shoe shops, or then they all became charity shops, or they're all coffee shops. There's not connected thinking properly. And I really would like to see the local planning authority to have the ability to refuse applications for too many of the same type of shop, and actually decide applications based on the context of what's nearby, not just assessing every application in isolation, which they do seem to do sometimes. And also, of course, very usefully, some empty premises would be better off as small work hubs, as has already been discussed earlier. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Frank. Paul, did you want to come back about anything anyone said so far?
A couple of points on the health issue. I mean, I think that's really interesting, and the movement seems to be, and I don't know what it's like in your area, this merger of adult social care and healthcare, and the implications for how that will be managed across an area. So I think that's something that you kind of need to bear in mind. Particularly, we've seen the massive strain on care home for older residents and things like that. So I suspect that's going to be something that changes quite significantly in the future. A real way of working. The commuting issue and building homes linked to businesses and things like that, I think that's a really interesting thing as well. And one thing that we talked about in the pre-meeting, but I didn't put into my thing, is live-work units as well, whether there's opportunities to have more live-work units, particularly now that people are getting used to working from home and having that blended approach to work-life balance. So is there scope to develop more live-work units in city centres perhaps as well, particularly that would attract a younger workforce and things like that? Shops, that's a really tricky issue because of use classes and things like that, and the limited ability to be able to control that. So I think there are other options outside the planning regime. We've got a number of local market towns that have set up development trusts basically to have ownership and therefore control over those kind of mixes of developments in in their town centres. I'm not sure what scope there is in a local plan to be able to control to that fine-tuned degree that you perhaps are wanting there, that is needed perhaps, but you have to look outside the local plan, I think, is the answer to that one.
Thanks very much, Paul. Samantha.
Yes, I was interested in the care workers aspects that have been discussed by some people. They are key workers, and it's been mentioned possibly that they are low paid as well. So for a healthy economy, we need people to be paid well so they can participate in the economy. So perhaps there could be pay monitoring, especially for women and minorities who tend to be in those industries. It would be really helpful, and not just care workers, but other key workers such as retail. Maybe that would be a useful idea. There's been mention of the Oxford and Cambridge Arc. I'm not aware that there's good transport links to get from our area into Oxford. So maybe it would be helpful to develop transport links if they aren't good enough to develop that area. I like the idea of the multi-general housing, because that would really help communities for them to retain that sense of community. And also the village halls and solar panels sounds like a brilliant idea, and getting those community interest groups started would be wonderful. Also to invest generally in renewable energy. So hydrogen has the potential for the aircraft industry to make Stansted a really clean industry, the airports there, so that we can resume going on national travel journeys in a way that doesn't damage the environment, which would be lovely. Tourism in the area as well is really important. So developing tourism here so that we have art to look at and culture as part of our environment as well would be something that could help the local economy to flourish. And that could be part of our identity as villages that, for instance, have conservation areas and lovely open spaces. So we could develop that as part of our arts and culture and preserve those spaces to help our communities as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Samantha. Richard, I think you were next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, jolly good. Yeah, I mean, like Shara and Frank, my main concern is with regard to town centres. I mean, Shara mentioned the permitted development rights and the prospect of retail automatically being able to convert to residential. I mean, this is a serious concern. And I mean, I know that discussion has been taking place about the possibility of using an Article 4 direction. I mean, if that is a way around the issue, then I really think it needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency. I know that the Town Council have had discussions with the Planning Department at Uttlesford, and really they don't want to know. So I think if that is a way around the problem, it does need to be treated with a degree of urgency. I think the other point is that I think Janet actually touched on this, which is the loss of employment sites. it does seem that when someone moves out of an employment site, they automatically try to get residential development on it. And all you have to do is just a bit of test marketing, and you know, you prove there's no market for it. So can we have our residential permission, please? I think that needs to be addressed as well, and much more protection needs to be given for employment uses. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to check that, is there anyone from UDC who wants to come back on any of that? We might not have the right people on here to do that, but if you do, say now. No, they don't. Okay. Oh, Stephen, did you want to say something?
Just to say, permitted, the government's changes to permitted, I would say recent, but they're not recent anymore. Changes to permitted development rights does restrict what the council is able to do. We do have the power to put in place Article 4 directions, which removes people's permitted development rights, thereby requiring them to seek planning permission for changes, for example, change of use, which they might otherwise be able to do through PD. We need to have good reasons to do that. We also, I mean, the reason the government is changing permitted development rights, their case for doing so is to allow more flexibility. Now there are strong arguments against that, but the government, that is the government's case. I don't really have much more to add to that, but it's something the council has been raised to the council, and the council will look at.
Great, thank you. Helinda, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of issues that have been raised. So I'll answer a couple of issues. One of them being Uttlesford District Council are a member of a partnership called the Digital Innovation Zone, which covers the west of Essex and the east of Hertfordshire. And the Digital Innovation Zone partners, there's a whole load of people, health partners, education partners, loads and loads of people, and we are part of that partnership. They've managed to get about £1.8 million to install ultra-fast broadband into all of the GP practices across the whole of those 5 local authority areas. And I think that the point was made about health needing really good digital connectivity. Hopefully that's going to be there for the GP practices very, very soon. And Princess Alexandra is a very strong member of that partnership, and everybody's working really, really closely together to try and make sure that the new hospital is as digital as it can possibly be. The other thing I wanted to mention is that those 5 local authorities that are involved in the Digital Innovation Zone are also involved in another partnership, which is a sub-partnership of the UK Innovation Corridor, which is the old, what used to be called London Stansted Cambridge Corridor. And those 5 local authorities are now branding themselves as the Innovation Core, and building on the fact that Public Health England are moving into Harlow, are actually trying to sell the 5 local authority areas in the middle of the UK Innovation Corridor, being Broxbourne, East Hertfordshire, Epping, Harlow and Uttlesford, as the place for life sciences to grow and to encourage people in inward investment and all sorts of things like that. So I just wanted to do something positive as well.
Thank you, Linda. Always good to have something positive. I just want to see if there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to add. In particular, I'm looking at Alison and James. Not to put you on the spot. If you've got nothing to say, that's all good. But no. Okay, so anyone else who hasn't spoken who would like to add something? I'm happy to. Stuart? Yes, Stuart. Oh, you're on mute, Stuart.
I should be unmuted now. That's better. Thank you. I'd just like to ask Martin whether there's any potential to expand Chesford Park, and if so, does he see that happening in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin.
Yes, very much so. We've got a very ambitious plan to take the park to its eventual size, which is 1 million square feet, which still will be encapsulated with a lot of green space around it. And then, of course, we've got the surrounding countryside. So in terms of its sort of visual impact, it sounds a big number, but actually at its core, where in fact it sits in its geology, it won't be sort of that imposing from further afield, as it were. So we've got some very exciting plans, and essentially what we're trying to do, as I say, is to strengthen that ladder of accommodation so that we can literally foster that moving through from concept through to full farmer outcomes through at the park.
Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, would you like to do a part two?
And just stop me if it crackles.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a bit, we'll go with it.
Okay. The only other things I wanted to say is I think we have the opportunity for more local procurement. So working with the developers who are coming in, trying to help our businesses get ready to bid for contracts so that there's more sort of local circulation of that wealth. And with talking early to developers, it's often possible to do that. At the same time, having an employment and training code with them as well around things like apprenticeships. I think over COVID, local purchasing happened very, very well. People wanted to be able to go to the places they normally go to buy in the future. So I think there is a change in how we have bought, even though there's been a lot online. I think a lot of people, especially local markets, have been particularly successful. And if people are working more at home, they are in our economy more and able to use the goods and services that are there. So again, it's just keeping that everything circulating locally. The only other area I was going to mention was I think we have a good base already. We have a good community and voluntary sector. We have particular industrial sectors which will provide quite a base for moving onward. So science has already been mentioned, the construction of new houses, green technology, sustainable buildings, all of that again is a generator of possible new companies. Aviation, yes, it will pick up, the airport will start to grow again, but our largest sites are those on what I call the apron of the airport. And there might be some way that some of them might not in the future have to always be aviation related. I think we've all changed our mind about care workers. I would just support what Samantha said. We have to sort out proper pay for people we value and raise the profile of that of care and health services as a good area to work and a good area to gain your skills. I think we also have the opportunity for more warehousing and distribution, but again, the group I chair, we've looked at food production, food growing, rural crafts, and connecting the type of industries that we could develop to provide additional local purchasing opportunities. And that's it really. Thank you very much.
Very much to get that all in. Sorry about your microphone's a bit crackly, but I think we got most of that. Thank you. Shara, did you want to add something?
I did. Thanks, Janet. I did hear what you were saying. I just wanted to talk about the working from home, that this will be a thing in the future, that if one thing that we've learned from COVID is working from home is not a bad thing. It means you don't have to commute. Well, I don't need to tell all you guys, we're all on a Zoom meeting, so we all know the benefit of working from home. But it does also mean the one thing that I did notice was the local loyalty, and that we want to continue with that local loyalty. We're all local people, and sometimes people aren't aware of how they can support their businesses locally. So there are lots of methods, and actually the biggest thing that I talk about all the time, never mind all the work that we do, or never mind the work that I do in my paid job, is communication. And it is not just, you know, having good broadband and things like that, but it is sharing your message. So it's all very well us being very well meaning and having some ideas, but if we don't share it properly, and I mean we have to cover all bases, not just email newsletters. I think we have to use the old-fashioned methods as well, which is hilarious because I run a digital agency, so I spend all my time saying stay away from paper, but we do need to cover all ground so that we can make sure that we are speaking to everybody. So I think you guys have all made some really good positive comments about things that we can do in the future. Saffron Walden is a really nice place to be, and regarding health and well-being and living in the place that you work, I think it is attainable. I think there's a lot more skill here than I think, and skilled work needed. I mean, I've been trying to recruit a developer for such a long time now, and everyone wants to come from Cambridge or from London to come and work for me. There must be people here that are techies that want to come and work for my company. You know, we're crying out for this. So it's kind of trying to find that balance. I'm not the only business that is in that situation. So it's just communicating better, really, and sharing when there are jobs. Maybe we can have some kind of central hub to make sure that the local people are getting them. So that's my bit. I'm going to be quiet now.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Cheryl. Those are really good points. I think, Edward, you have your hand up and haven't spoken yet. So I'm just going to come to you, then I'll come back to Paul for a final comment on this agenda point. So Edward, over to you.
Thank you, Angela. Just a couple of perplexities. Until Janet spoke just now, I think agriculture really hadn't got a look in or a mention. And I would have thought agriculture is pretty big in Uttlesford. And I guess it's pretty much on the verge of a major change following the agriculture bill and the concept of public goods and the sort of biodiversity changes that agriculture is going to have to come up with. And I'm just wondering whether there are going to be new employment patterns around agriculture and what those might be. And also in the context of Brexit, there's going to be some changes in employment patterns in agriculture. So I'd be interested to know something about that. I was also interested that the fourth industrial revolution was something to do with the cloud and not to do with a post-fossil fuel economy. I was expecting the fourth industrial revolution to be a green industrial revolution. I was really a bit disappointed that it wasn't. But I would have thought there are huge opportunities, employment opportunities around kind of the retrofitting that's going to be involved. The whole switch in our lifestyles away from fossil fuels is bound surely to generate huge employment and innovation opportunities. And I thought that might get featured somewhere. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Edward. Mark, I'm not quite clear. Were you wanting to add something, or have you not? Sorry about that. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, very quickly. I don't want to hog it. I totally agree that the whole concept of working from home is absolutely, the way the world is going to change, and we need to embrace it. And there's a lot of good attached to that. But also, of course, people will still need to have strong social interaction that's going to be important to their well-being. Therefore, the sort of social spaces that we've talked about is really important. One other quick point I just wanted to flag up relates to the health and social care sector, which I think it was Paul who alluded to. There's going to be much closer integration in that arena, and that's absolutely right. One of the things I think the council, as part of the local plan, should give real consideration to, though, is the whole need for residential nursing care home capacity. So the reason I mentioned this is that as we have a significantly ageing population, of course, we will need a variety of facilities. Now, increasingly, because of technology, we're going to be able to care for people in their own homes for much longer periods of time and monitor them remotely. There will still, however, I suspect, be some form of residential and care home capacity required. But across Harlow, Epping and Uttlesford, a few years ago, I did a study and there was, or looked at this issue, and there was about 3,500 care home residential nursing beds across all the districts. However, they weren't catering for local need. Often we were importing need from London, where well-intentioned residents in London were moving their elderly relatives out into cheaper nursing and residential care. And of course, every residential nursing care home bed needs to be staffed. And so what is a scarce commodity in terms of care staff, which is going to be critical in the future, we need to be very careful we're not creating a problem or enhancing the problem by just importing care needs from other neighbouring areas where just because it's an opportunity. So I think the council can do a lot in terms of its planning around some of its thinking about what would be the threshold or need for residential care home capacity in the future.
Thanks, Mark, and apologies again for overlooking you there.
No, that's fine.
Paul, could I come back to you for some final comments, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating and really heartening that you've got this engagement. Actually, I've done a couple of local plan consultations myself, and it's never been like this. I have to say, this is really heartening. On the last couple of points, the one thing that sprung to my mind when we were talking about the employment use and city centres in particular is this idea of pop-up planning. I spent some time in Berlin at the Leibniz Institute, and they had big swathes of the city that became vacant as the wall came down and all the infrastructure came down. And they had this massive, this push for pop-up planning. So they had no idea what they were going to do with it. So they just tried things, and if it didn't work, it would end, and then something else would come in and replace it. And then once something was permanent or found to be working, it became permanent. And I don't know to what extent you can build that into your local plan, the idea, and it also goes to this change in agricultural use. There's going to be huge changes as a result of Brexit and also COVID and local food supply chains. So could you allow planning permissions for pop-up farm shops, pop-up drive-throughs, pop-up, so people can test ideas rather than having to go through the full planning application process before they actually start doing something. And finally, the green industrial revolution, yes, it's on the knife edge. It could go either way. It could be very technological, economically based, or it could be very green. We were talking in our pre-meeting, and one of the reasons I put the Village Hall example in is you can go down the route of having huge solar farms, just taking up acres and acres of land, or you can do it so that they're placed on existing buildings, and you have the same number of solar panels, but they're on existing buildings. And that, again, is something you can determine through the kind of planning processes, that you favour that kind of distributed, community-owned, community infrastructure that delivers the same benefits in terms of green economy, but a lot more local economy. I imagine most of the solar farms are owned by people outside the area, and that money's going outside the area as well. So there are options to take a more community-based green approach to this, and it makes it more resilient as well. If it's distributed, it's much more resilient in those kind of terms. So I think that's a really good debate to have, whether you go down the kind of green industrial revolution or the kind of technologically driven, economically driven fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you very much. Paul, thank you so much for your presentation. That's brilliant. Please stay with us, because I'm going to hand over to Joanna now, who is going to take us through any questions from people viewing. Thank you, Joanna.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for all your contributions tonight. It's been a really interesting discussion. We've got some questions and comments from people listening, and I'll try and answer a couple, and Ben, I might ask you just to answer a couple on the transport related ones, because actually they have been top of the list. But first of all, we've got a question from Jackie Dean. Does the council know which type of businesses could be created as new employment sources within new communities or growing existing towns and large villages? And that's also related to a question by Richard Gilliard. So to what extent can the local plan predict the types of businesses that will come here? Should specific types of buildings be planned to attract certain sectors, laboratories, warehouses, offices, factories, or is that too much of a risk if businesses go elsewhere? So as part of the evidence informing the local plan, we have some employment evidence already, and we will be looking to add to that. It's rather a question of timing where we do that within the local plan, because the COVID pandemic is skewing things enormously, and we do need to sort of have there will be some lasting effects, but we don't know yet. So, but we will be getting more employment evidence base, and we will be looking at the needs of different aspects of the economy, and that's one of the reasons why we were very keen tonight to invite people to speak from different sectors of the local economy. We also did actually invite someone from agriculture, Edward, to answer your comment, but they didn't respond for whatever reason. And also, I'd just like to point out too that agriculture, just also picking up on one of the comments about too much development eroding the green spaces, but we have 97% of the district is covered in agricultural land. So that is the vast majority of the land use, but contributes to less than 1% of the economy. So I think we need to look, and there will be changes in agriculture, but I think we need to look to be supporting, looking at all the different economic contributions to the sector and how we can optimise those now, but also in the future and this vision. So that's something that we will be working on. So just on some sort of infrastructure questions that maybe Ben, I could ask you to respond to. So we've got a question here. We've heard a lot about transport throughout the themes, but it's often said that the transport network in Uttlesford is off-putting businesses coming here. How can we assess the needs of businesses and particularly the types of businesses we want to attract?
Well, I think this is all part of the conversation, and you know, welcome the comments into the consultation, and you're very welcome to sort of email me and contact me, and I can facilitate a conversation with other teams within Essex that deal with sort of the day-to-day sort of engagement with businesses and sort of travel planning. We are also working with Transport East, which is the regional transport agency, to develop a new sort of transport strategy for both Essex and the wider region, to tackle some of the existing sort of pinch points and capacity problems within the network, to sort of facilitate sort of sustainable growth and support the businesses and the economy in the region.
And just there's another question from Jackie Dean, which is interesting. So have you experience of creating a policy to require housing developers to fund or provide free or subsidised public transport to science parks and other key local employers? So the Wellcome Trust already provide free bus service for their employees linked to their planning consent from the railway stations in Saffron Walden. And we heard from Martin Sylvester about the Chesford Research Park and the transport put on there. And so this is really calling for housing developers to provide to think about providing the transport.
Yeah, I mean, it's very common with this sort of employment developments, as you say, to secure a dedicated sort of shuttle bus or public transport service. And for residential developments, particularly larger ones, then we do try and always try to secure a financial contribution for improvements to bus services through the sort of Section 106 planning obligations. But yeah, I mean, I think we have those policies within sort of Essex's policies, and I think if we have similar policies within Uttlesford's local plan, then that strengthens our case and ensures that we can maximise the benefits and maximise the amount of contributions we can get from developers of residential estates.
I think that covers the questions. We've got some other comments in there. We've got one on housing as well, but I think we'll leave that. We've seen it, and we've got a theme next week, I think, the next forum on homes and housing. So I'm happy if we want to finish this part, Angela, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jonah. That's great. So just to reiterate to everybody, panel and people watching at home, please go and put your comments on the website, UDC website, new local plan, and submit your comments under this theme. And if you haven't managed to get your point across, I'm sorry, we've had loads of interest in this topic, which is brilliant. But it does mean everyone hasn't managed to make all the points they wanted to. So what happens next? What happens is the consultation document is now on the website, on UDC website, open for public consultation. Comments received by the 24th of March will be summarised by officers and discussed at the forum meeting on the 7th of April. Comments received after this date will still be taken into account by officers when preparing the draft local plan. If anyone has any questions about that, do let me know, but I think we've got into the swing of that now. So I think I'm only running about 8 minutes late, so I'm not in too much trouble. So I've got time to thank very much Paul Cowie, Dr. Paul Cowie, and also Shara, Martin, and Wendy Martin. It's confusing, you've got the same name. Thank you very much for your contributions to this theme. It's been really interesting to speak to you. And if you want to leave us now, we're actually going back to an earlier theme for the summaries on that. You're welcome to stay if you're interested. This was actually on transport, so not that far away from this particular theme. In fact, transport's in every theme, as well as having its own theme. So if you want to stay, please do. But if you want to go, please feel free. We will not be offended. We are now going back to transport. So Ben, I believe you're going to introduce the summary document for this and tell us about some key points.
I am, yeah. So this is the feedback that we received from the stakeholder event in January that was specifically about transport, and we sort of asked people what options for sustainable transport would they'd like to see in Uttlesford, and would they support. And the first sort of question was focused around access to services, and where should new development be focused with regards to sort of services. And services can be sort of public transport or doctor's surgery or groceries, sort of local shops, employment, etc. So the feedback we got was that new development of all kinds should be focused in areas with, with good accessibility to public transport, whether that be rail stations or buses. And new homes in particular should be focused in areas with access to, sorry, I'm just going to have a glass of water. Sorry. So new homes in particular should be focused or located in areas that will need easy access to sort of local town centre or local shopping parade by non-car modes, i.e. you can walk or cycle or take the bus relatively easily. And if there are any sort of remote settlements, i.e. new garden communities, then they should be built where they can support their own services, where they're large enough that they can support their own sort of supermarket or local shopping centre, or sort of employment and jobs, so that people can stay within the development and don't need to travel outside to minimise the amount of trips they're making. I'm sorry, I think I don't know what I've eaten.
Don't worry, Ben, we're all on Zoom all day. I think by this time in the evening, probably given up.
So the next area theme was local traffic neighbourhoods, which is sort of walkable neighbourhoods. And there was a very strong support for this, and particularly designing these neighbourhoods and new residential neighbourhoods to prioritise pedestrians and cyclists. A lot of comments came back saying there was a need for more secure cycle parking at key destinations such as rail stations. There was a lot of comments focused on the lack of safe walking and cycling routes, particularly in and around Saffron Walden. Apologies, I realised I've just spelled Walden wrong there. And then locating new development near public transport hubs means less reliance on cars. But there was also recognition, and a lot of people stated that the rural nature of Uttlesford means that the car will remain the main mode of transport and be the dominant mode for the foreseeable future. Then when it came to the public transport strategy, there was a lot of comments about the current bus network, and that it needs significant improvement if it is going to shift people out of the cars, and doesn't work. It isn't convenient for most people at the current time. A particular focus on bus services not being integrated and coordinated with rail services, so people will pull into a train station and they'll then just miss the bus and have to wait 30 minutes for a bus up to Saffron Walden, for example. There was support for any new development being built to ensure that they had there was a bus stop within walking distance, and that new sort of bus lanes and busways were designed within the development. Many people commented on the fact there needed to be an integrated bus or public transport strategy for the district. So it's sort of integrated bus and rail to resolve some of those coordination issues. And there was a strong support for the policies whereby developers should fund bus services to new developments and also subsidise existing services for existing communities, so the existing communities benefit from the new development. When it came to technology and transports, people recognised it was vital that new development included ultra-fast broadband, and that 5G was needed to reduce the need to travel, particularly in a post-COVID world. There was mention, I think that was previously discussed in the local economy discussion, that there's a need for local workspace hubs in these new communities, especially now more people are working from home and their homes may not be suitable, but they can't go into the office anymore. So sort of local satellite workspace. There was some skepticism about the impact of autonomous vehicles and drones and new technologies coming forward. It was felt that if these new technologies are being put into new homes, sort of ultra-fast broadband and sort of autonomous vehicles, then need to be tried and tested and piloted and independently assessed to understand what the impacts might be on building costs and viability. And then finally, when it came to electric vehicle charging, again, there was very strong support for the provision of charging infrastructure within new developments, and recognition that the developers should provide this for both private parking spaces and public on-street parking within new developments. And that developers should fund the upgrade to any electrical grid capacity required. There was also support for integrating solar panels on roofs and linking those to sort of the charging infrastructure within people's homes. So yeah, hopefully that was gives a summary of the feedback so far, and welcome any comments on it.
Thanks very much, Ben. That's brilliant. Frank, you were first off the mark there. So
good press. Thank you. Just remembering that we were all asked to comment from our own representative perspective. So as representing heritage, there's nothing in this particular summary document, either the one page or the 4 or 5 details afterwards, about heritage. So I think we should try and note that new infrastructure should be rooted away from heritage assets and from their settings, unless it's really unavoidable. You know, they should be taken account of. I also think that outdated transport buildings should themselves actually be protected or preserved as part of our cultural heritage. So, for instance, you have things like the railway bridge structure near Tesco's in Saffron Walden, which obviously shows the route of the former railway, which many people may not even realise is there. So these kind of things ought to be protected in some fashion and recognised for their cultural relevance to our heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. As always, if there's things missing from this summary, please go and add them to the website. They can still be taken into account. Samantha.
Yes, I thought that that the suggestion that new development should be near transport hubs is good, but in some places the transport hub doesn't have the infrastructure to support that development, so the infrastructure has to come first. So for instance, schools, GPs and open spaces and roads are all infrastructure needs that haven't necessarily been taken into account so far when housing has been put into smaller villages that are near transport stations, for instance. And that does impact all of us. It impacts our schools and causes environmental impacts as well, because parents are driving around to get their children to the school because they can't get into the local one. And it creates a rush hour and pollutes our roads. So I thought that would be important. So to just make sure that you've got the infrastructure there first. The other thing was the comment that the car will be the main mode of transport in rural areas. I think it has to be green as well, and it has to be possibly shared. If it's going to be still the main mode of transport, it would have to be shared and electric or hydrogen. There was also a comment as well about footpaths and cycling, and suggesting that they would be shared with horse riders. And I wondered if that's safe, because horses can get quite alarmed as well. So it might not be safe for pedestrians or cyclists. So I just thought that could be considered. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Samantha. Anthony.
Thank you. Just looking at the bullet points that came out together with the presentation just now, I think the 2 points that really concern me are the access to services in the public transport strategy. I should say that I have no qualms over the concept of low traffic neighbourhoods. I have little qualms over the question of technology and transport, because that's something that's going to happen anyway. And similarly with electrical vehicle charging. But access to services, what it comes down to is quite simple. The fact is what is said in the question. Would you support a policy that makes planning consent easier for new and existing communities to benefit from commercially viable local services? What are those local services? Well, the only one that is the West Anglia Main Line. The rest, there isn't any other commercially viable service at all in that respect. And therefore, in the circumstances, one's got to just look at where the line touches the district. Look at Stansted. Could you build further in Stansted? I wonder. Look at Elsenham. Call that Helsenham. Say no more. Look at Newport. We'll look at the way that Newport's been developed. Look at Aldby End. Well, now you're touching into Aldby End estates, and there's a limit to the extent to which anybody's going to get there. And look at Chesford. Well, we know what the last council wanted to do with regard to Chesford, and what happened to that. So something's got to give somewhere, and I don't know where. As for public transport, otherwise, just about every single any form of public transport there is subsidised by Essex County Council. They have made it absolutely crystal clear where they stand with regard to it, and that is that effectively, as of the opportunity to cut it, they will. They cut it in January without telling anybody, and especially in South Walden. I don't know about the rest of the district. I really haven't had the opportunity to check, but I wouldn't at all be surprised that they have cut it elsewhere. The suggestion that there be some form of dial-up service is a wonderful concept. Think of it in this way: if you had something like that, it's got to be something, particularly if it's going to be connect with the train, that it connects with the train and not with waiting for people to turn up. So in those circumstances, I would suggest that is probably not the appropriate way of looking at it on the way to catching a train, but coming back, there may be a possibility to deal with it that way. However, if you work out the economies, especially in South Walden, where there is this need for an integration that really doesn't exist in the way it used to, then in those circumstances, you're talking about how many buses are you going to provide, and is the cost of providing those buses going to be less than the cost of a taxi ride? And I would suggest it won't be far short.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Samantha, quick one.
I just wondered about the on-demand, because I thought that because most rural journeys are short journeys, not necessarily those ones that are connecting with other forms of transport, it might be viable to have such an on-demand service. And it might be just worth considering at the back of your mind if there is viability for that, since most people are just nipping out to go to the shops on the spur of the moment, or nipping out to get this, that and the other, and don't want to walk more than 15 minutes. And we know that there's 15-minute walkability as the concept of the walkable village or town. So having like an on-demand short journey service might be the way forward. I'm not saying it has to be the way forward, but it's something that could be considered. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, if anyone, anything else to add on transport? Ben, are you happy with those comments?
Yeah, I mean, I can respond to a couple of them. You know, just to emphasize that that summary, sort of one pager, was just sort of summary of all the comments received. So I just, you know, tried to sort of condense them as much as possible. With regards to the on-demand, there are on-demand services within the county already, and you know, they serve some journey purposes for some people, but for others they don't. So you know that it's a developing area. With regards to sort of bus services, I'm not in the public transport team, but I know obviously that with COVID have been a number of cuts to the services. But having spoken to colleagues in the team last week, they've told me that they have managed to secure quite a considerable amount of additional funding from Section 106 over the past couple of years, and they're hoping to launch a number of improvements to the services going forward later this year. So I think there will be some sort of significant improvements to bus services across the district as we go forward, and once I know about that, I can share that.
Great, thank you very much. Well, just a reminder that on transport, there will be a presentation of key points to the local plan leadership group on the 23rd of March, and then we will get a subsequent feedback to this forum on the 24th of March. So not the last word on transport for sure, but thank you very much everybody for that feedback. Now, believe it or not, we're going back even further to character and heritage. And I think Stephen is just going to give us a quick update on where we are with that. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry. I think actually Elizabeth is going to give us a short update.
Sorry, Elizabeth.
Yes, good evening. Yes, a report with a summary of the comments made up to Christmas was taken to the local plan leadership group on Monday. They just made a few comments. The first comment actually was that they thought it was quite interesting how transport and accessibility features highly even in this theme. So the new developments should be served by public transport and good footpaths. They made the point that obviously in the evidence base, they will be looking at to where the development is needed. But also, you know, bear in mind what COVID has done. Do we actually need development to be near rail stations? So that's something that maybe we've got to explore for the future, you know, what will be important in the future. In respect of density, there was support for having higher density developments, more terraced housing rather than detached housing. There was, you know, seen as that, you know, the housing that was being delivered wasn't wasn't the right kind of housing for our existing residents. They wanted more smaller family homes and also more age appropriate homes, so bungalows was mentioned. In respect to standardisation, it was, I think the view was on that we've got to determine what standards we want in the local plan. Do we want standards on environmental aspects or space standards? But any standards that we have shouldn't cut across any existing legislation or regulations such as building regs. And those were really the main points of what they raised.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I think it just is really interesting to see how what the work we're doing here feeds back into the process. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and feed back to us on that. Good. So the upcoming theme on the 10th of March will be homes. And the guest speaker is going to be Jo Mills, who is the co-author of the Council's recent housing study. I think there'll be a couple of guest members as well, but I haven't got information on who those people are at the moment. But that will be on the 10th of March. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion about homes. I think we're on to any other business. Anything anyone wants to add? I have two things to say. One is, I hope we might all meet in person one day. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be so nice to actually see you all. And secondly, I'd just like to congratulate everybody on the way we are now getting through not one, not two, but 3 topics on time, early. You're all becoming incredibly efficient. I mean, the amount of information that is flying around in an hour and 50 minutes is unbelievable. So thank you so much, everybody. You're doing an amazing job. And I talk to a lot of people in the community because I've got a database of about 35,000 people at Saffron Hall, and they're all watching. They all know about it. Everyone's talking about it, and so you're having a real impact. So thank you so much for giving your time. It's really important, but it's really having an impact. So thank you, and thank you to the UDC officers who are doing the same. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you